I'm sure that each of you have heard the opinion that technology has captivated the modern world. No, I'm not going to talk about the dangers of devices or gadgets. My name's Detective Void, and we only discuss SCP objects on this channel. Today, our focus is on SCP-217, aka the Clockwork Virus. It has a certain pedigree, so we'll talk about a whole series of objects, among which are even aliens and gods. In 1943, this anomalous little family narrowly took over the world, but we'll get to that in due time. SCP-217 belongs to the Keter class and is an incurable virus previously unknown to science. It's transmitted during contact with either a contaminated surface or an infected living creature. In the latter case, bodily fluids from infected subjects also become dangerous. Meanwhile, the chance of getting infected during contact is almost 100%. The pathogen is dangerous for all organisms in the animal kingdom. That is, it doesn't just affect plants, mushrooms, other viruses, and bacteria. In addition to its incredible resistance, SCP-217 has the ability to not manifest in an infected person's body for a long time. People may not experience symptoms for several years, or they may not pay attention to them. The virus affects the structure of living tissues, turning them into something called organic metal. The biochemical processes in the body change, and together with an unknown anomalous force, they transform the infected creature into a complex clock mechanism, consisting of a multitude of gears and other parts that take over the functions of the corresponding parts of the body. The joints change to a system of gears. The heart turns into a mechanism of tubes and gears. And the eyes function like old film cameras. Foundation scientists have not yet been able to study the transformation process in detail. It's known that in the early stages of SCP-217 infection, the subject may experience only mild agitation, sleep disturbances, and joint stiffness. The phase of changes that cause severe pain comes later. These mutations primarily manifest on the surface of the body in all creatures except mammals, including humans. The transformation of a person begins from the inside, and can be fully completed before the appearance of external symptoms. The initial stages of infection are accompanied by a severe apathy and a general blunting of emotional reactions. Some of the infected patients reported feeling movement under their skin and an accompanying ticking noise. It can be heard throughout the whole body with a stethoscope. For an infected person, the sounds are most distinct when the pathogen spreads through the shoulders, neck, and head. In the later stages of infection, but before the appearance of external symptoms, the patient's mental state worsens. They're in a depressed mood all the time, and get irritated when faced with new tasks. The actions of the infected become repetitive and mechanical, and they easily lose focus and get distracted. There have been studies of the human brain after complete transformation, but the results are classified. In the stage when major internal organs and structures are being transformed, the subjects begin to experience severe pain. They turn into parts made of either organic metal that looks like steel, iron, and brass, or of materials that look like rubber, leather, wood, or glass. These parts cut into the remaining living tissue, causing a sensation like a torn ligament or a knife wound. The new structural elements of the body have the density and strength of the materials they resemble. Meanwhile, they're much more resilient and contain the DNA of the infected patient. Parts of the mechanism are capable of regeneration, but it's noticeably slower than in living tissues. Experiments have shown that the parts transformed by the virus can be replaced. The body is not harmed by the use of spare parts made of ordinary technical material. They should be made from the same metal that the damaged biomechanical analog looks like. In fact, a person infected with SCP-217 can be repaired like a car. The Foundation is aware of at least one incident involving a mass infection of the Clockwork Virus in several metropolitan areas. The date of the incident and the names of the localities are classified, so it's unclear whether there's still a threat of undetected cases among the residents of these cities. A sample of SCP-217 is currently being held in one of the Foundation zones. There are airlocks on both sides of its chamber for entry and exit. You're only allowed to be in the object's containment area if you have on a full protective suit. A sterilizing chemical shower, a 24-hour quarantine, and post-exposure medical observation are also required. In the case of depressurization, the protocol requires that the area containing the virus be sealed off, along with the laboratories where it's studied. A certain chemical agent, ZIR-217-11, is used to neutralize the pathogen and is sprayed in the air. All those infected with SCP-217 are isolated and monitored. The surface of items that may have been touched by infected persons must be sterilized. SCP-217 is part of a whole group of objects that make up one anomalous mechanical organism. There's a hub that worships it as a god. This is a religious organization called the Church of the Broken God Hub. They believe biological life to be evil, and they worship mechanization. These fanatics, in an attempt to restore their deity, brought together a whole set of anomalous items. As a result, they ended up with something called the Broken God, or SCP-001. The mechanical entity came to life in 1942 near La Paz, Mexico. This iron leviathan raised a real hell there, known in the Foundation as the 001 apotheosis event. It caused large-scale destruction of the environment in western Mexico. Remarkably, the Foundation couldn't do anything and just watched what happened from the sidelines. At that point, a weak and small organization, the Allied Occult Initiative, came to the rescue. It later became the basis for the now powerful Global Occult Coalition. The occultists had an artifact that could allegedly stop the Broken God. The Foundation delivered an agent with an anomalous object to the 001 apotheosis site. Then, on June 25, 1943, an employee of the Occult Initiative somehow summoned another huge mechanical entity. It's now known as a malfunctioning destroyer, or SCP-2399. It's not known exactly what happened, but the resulting mechanism shot a beam at SCP-001 and a powerful explosion occurred. As a result, the Broken God broke up into separate active components. SCP-2399 is inexplicably located on Jupiter, where it caused the Great Red Spot to appear. It's known that since 1971, the object has received an electromagnetic signal from the Triangulum Galaxy, which is 3 million light-years from our planet. But let's get back to the events of 43. The Foundation put the separate parts of the destroyed SCP-001 into containment. Among them was the Clockwork Virus. It was activated by another object, SCP-882, aka A-Machine. It is strictly forbidden to place the object near SCP-217. The machine is a large pile of screws, gears, belts, and other parts. It assimilates all metal objects that it comes into contact with, turning them into new parts of its mechanism. All of them constantly rotate while making almost no noise. Another component of SCP-001 was an object made of wires. It received the number SCP-229, along with the nickname Wireweed. This is a 94-kilogram parasite identified as a silicone lifeform. It feeds off of electricity and attacks anything that generates even the weakest current. The entity can enter living organisms, enveloping the spine and brain. In this way, it can force the host to move towards a source of electricity. Joint experiments with SCP-229 and SCP-217 are allowed only with the permission of members of the O5 Council. Another object from this series is SCP-1139, or the Broken Tongue. This is a 20-centimeter tall metal cuboid. If the object is exposed to an electric current, then anyone in the vicinity starts to speak an unknown language. Meanwhile, all of the victims forget and cannot relearn any world languages in existence. The reach of the effect's radius is exponentially proportional to the strength of the current. A weak static shock, for instance, affects people within an 80-centimeter radius. The only way to restore a person's ability to speak normally is to treat them with Class AA amnestics. During one of the raids on a Church of the Broken God outpost, Foundation operatives also discovered object SCP-808, named the Mechanical Choir. This is a 16-meter cylindrical structure that tapers into a cone at the top. Its base covers 30 square meters, and was supposedly intended to be a musician at the time of the Broken God's return. After the conclusion of the 001 apotheosis event and the elimination of all its anomalous components, only the inactive part of SCP-001 remained. This pile of scrap metal ended up at the bottom of the Gulf of California. Foundation specialists noted that if the entity had been revived amidst the current level of technology, it probably would have been impossible to avoid an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario. Indeed, even back in 1943, only members of the Occult Initiative were able to save humanity. So the Foundation had to reckon with the fact that other organizations own anomalous items too. As for the Church of the Broken God Hub, they had even attacked one of the Foundation's zones. Its cover building was that of a certain company, whose name includes the word Motors. A kamikaze girl drove into the building in a car, filled with canisters containing flammable compounds. The subsequent explosion destroyed the cover building and killed 5 agents. The zone itself was not damaged, but was locked down for 8 hours due to the attack that followed the explosion. The kamikaze turned out to be a girl named Amanda. We know that she fell under the cult's influence, dropping out of college and disappeared. The girl was declared missing, since she hadn't contacted her parents for 2 years. She had probably spent all this time in the hub. As you can see, in addition to the danger that these anomalous objects pose, the SCP Foundation has to deal with related organizations, some of which are hostile. And although on the one hand, the occultists helped to stop the mechanical entity, on the other, the entity was created by hub members. The Foundation's eternal ethical dilemma regarding the destruction of anomalies is particularly poignant in the history of this object. If the components of SCP-001 were unobtainable, the entity would not exist. Although in the Church of the Broken God, you could use a different object and get something completely different. But if the GOC had destroyed the artifact that summoned a malfunctioning destroyer from Jupiter, then you and I would no longer be able to philosophize on this topic. Many objects contained in the Foundation and other organizations pose a threat to humanity. Even SCP-217 can turn all living things into their own mechanical copies. Do you think the SCP Foundation should destroy anomalous objects? Or is the risk of their containment justified? Write about it in the comments below. Click the thumbs up if you like this video, and subscribe to my channel. The next object will be even more interesting.